I'd like to call a special council meeting for the town of Bay-Westfield on November 4th, 2021 to order at 6:00 p.m. We respectfully acknowledge that Bay-Westfield exists on the traditional Woolstock Way land. The lands of Wabanaki people are recognized in a series of peace and friendship treaties. Peace and friendship treaties to establish an ongoing relationship of peace, friendship, and mutual respect between equal nations. The river that runs by our town is known as Woolstock, along which live Woolstock Way, the people of the beautiful and bountiful river. We, the staff of elected representatives, pay respect to the elders past and present and descendants of this land. Welcome everybody to our budget discussion meeting. This is a first for the town of Bay-Westfield. We're new at doing this live, but we're going to do our best. This is a transition budget. We are at the start of 4 years of new beginnings while still trying to solve old challenges. We have serious financial issues before us that we are attempting to manage while still shaping a vision for our town. These are some of the obstacles that we are facing while attempting to position our town for success, at the same time being prudent stewards of the public purse, which at the end of the day is yours. We have received a 56% cut in our community funding and equalization grant. This equates to about 5% of our budget, or to put in other terms, about 7 cents on the tax rate. This was a huge blow. The funding legislation does not allow municipalities to predict their funding from year to year, making it difficult to plan for the future. Bay-Westfield was the 5th hardest hit municipality in the entire province, losing over $335,000. There are many costs beyond municipalities' control, and these have all gone up significantly. The costs of insurance, policing, fuel, electricity have all gone up exponentially. These are costs that are out of our hands. In short, we have lost a significant amount of revenue, and there is a 20% or more change in costs for things that are out of our control. We need to manage these challenges while still focusing on implementing what we can of the priorities from our strategic plan. We want to be sure we are relying on growth that is sustainable and budgeting accordingly. We all have a vision of what our town will be like in 10 years. This is what I see. I see a thriving community with a revitalized commercial core, varied and diverse housing options, intermunicipal transportation links, and a culture of supporting local and supporting each other. I see a vibrant town, all of us patronizing community businesses and growing both sunshine and nighttime economies existing in the form of craft breweries, cafe culture, restaurants, distilleries, wine bars, retail, all with our distinct local flair. I see a business hub along Colonel Nace, linking our businesses together as they support each other into success. I see multi-use housing, so there is a home for all demographics who want to enjoy the incredible quality of life we have here at Bay-Westfield. I see active transportation routes, bringing our children to school, bringing people together from one end of our town to another. I see a thriving cultural, recreational and leisure vibe, engaging our existing residents and drawing new ones in, even if just for the day. I see our waterfront used to its full advantage, with children playing along the beach, water sports of all kinds being enjoyed along our river, which is unmatched in its splendor and opportunity for recreation. This budget is the beginning. It's about improving Bay-Westfield and making our community an attractive destination, somewhere to make your forever home, somewhere people want to come and spend time and money, somewhere which offers high-quality, independent traders a chance to do well. By encouraging the people of Bay-Westfield to buy local, we can keep money in the local community. Then businesses can reinvest in their future. We want to ensure hard work doesn't go unrewarded. This budget is about developing our community and setting the table for thoughtful and intentional growth. It's about our potential, and at the end of the day, it's about you. Thank you. John, I think you're up.
Okay. Thank you, Your Worship and Council. It's a pleasure to bring our first budget to you for approval. And I'm very pleased to do this. I think it's a good start to be able to transform the town the way that you've articulated in the strategic plan and the way we work together on developing the tactical plan. So I want to thank you, and I hope that this meets with your approval tonight. And for those of you who are watching this evening, about the only assurance I can give you is that this may be long and tedious. Really what we're doing tonight is going in, or having a new beginning, but as the mayor said, we have some more challenges that we need to address. So the contents tonight are outlined here, and there's about 95 slides. We're going to try and keep it as brief as we can. So a little bit about our town. This chart really bothers me because really what we want is to have a broad base at the younger ages going down to a tail. This tells me that we have to make population growth a priority, and it has to be urgent. And that's something that we need to strike, and we've captured that in the strategic plan. Again, with the labor force, only 65% of our residents are in it. Population distribution, it's almost sort of normal with the weekend being the 20 to 29. However, as we grow with Envision St. John's help and the initiatives that we undertake, we hope to be able to change this so that in the next 2 censuses we'll start seeing some changes. This is an ugly chart. Usually I like pies, but not this one. The unfortunate part for us is that 98% of our property assessment base is residential. And that means that if there's any changes, it hits every single property owner in the pocketbook. Typically, when you have a large commercial and industrial sector, it's offset because of the way taxes are distributed. But here, it comes directly out of our pockets. So it doesn't matter what things we do to mitigate it, it's going to hurt at the end of the day. Now, what's going on in our local environment that we have to be mindful of as we develop the budget? Here's a little glimpse into historic inflation. I only go back to 2000 because Bay-Westfield started around 98. And what they're projecting next year, most people that we've read, is about 4%. This one is a little scary because it's exciting to think, oh, our assessment base grew. That means we're doing great things. The ugly truth about this particular slide is only 8% of the growth that you see going from 21 to 22 is because of new construction builds. The rest of it is just a market adjustment because the value of everybody's homes are going up. So the ugly truth here, only 8% is what I would consider real, or in the sense that that's new development. If we're going to have a virtuous growth cycle, that's going to have to grow significantly more. That may mean changes that some members of the community don't like. The other thing that we're mindful of is local government reform. The previous council and you both submitted to the Vibrant New Brunswick Committee, and both have been heard. We're still expecting the white paper in November. With implementation, we expect to go in 22. And really, until then, it doesn't matter what planning we do, it'll be speculation. So what administration has done is we've just made sure that we're prepared so that once we know what the details are, we'll be ready to act. So if I can give you 2 words of what we're doing regarding local government reform: mindful indifference. Okay? We have provincial funding challenges, as the mayor alluded to. We've lost 56% and 10% of the overall budget. Sorry, 6 more percent. I'd like to say that we had a constructive meeting, Your Worship, with the acting deputy minister yesterday. As we expected, we're not having any funds restored to us, but it was a good meeting, a productive meeting, and we'll be meeting with him again in the next week or 2 for some follow-up information. Our debt costs over time, pleased to say that we're somewhat in the modest side at about, I think it's 5.2% that our debt load is right now, which is, we're on the healthy side for that. Now, Your Worship, if you don't mind, I'll ask you to come up and speak to the strategic plan. This is Council's document that determines how administration is to make our decisions so that we can implement what Council wants in an intentional and thought-out manner. Okay, Your Worship? No, just use this one.
Oh, okay.
You can come up here. You don't need your computer.
Well, I've got my remarks on the computer.
Sorry, okay. I'll just let me know when you want me to change the slide.
So our vision for commercial strategic plan is a welcoming place to live, grow, and thrive. And that our new town tagline captures that reality perfectly, neighbors by nature. Thrive means that we're successful and we're happy and we have a great quality of life. Our mission is simple, meaningful, and action-oriented. The mission statement is facilitating growth, wellness, and prosperity through effective and forward-thinking leadership. Our common desire is to see the abundance of our town grow and mature, and to see our neighboring communities flourish will guide us into the future. And our values are courage, honesty, inclusion, justice, openness, teamwork, transparency, trust, and understanding. From a council perspective, you're seeing that here tonight with this budget presentation in terms of the teamwork we see around the table, the trust we have in each other, and the transparency that we are showing. Council has talked about the values we want to bring to our governance. Together we have discussed the importance of these values, and this is a piece of what it means to be neighbors by nature. So our mandate is facilitating balanced growth by encouraging population growth, enhancing our organizational capacity, establishing proactive infrastructure sustainability processes, furthering climate change adaptation work, and prioritizing community vitality. Our council seeks to make these priorities a reality and to bring all of the values to life through this mandate. Digging in, adaptation work, and prioritizing community vitality. And again, the plan at the end of the day is a roadmap to our vibrant future together. So our priorities for 2021, or that's you? Okay, you take it.
You weren't there then. Sorry, Your Worship.
All together.
Yeah, the previous council set up some priorities that they wish for us to achieve. I think it's important for council and members of the community to understand how the money's been spent in the past year before we go on talking about how we're going to be spending them in 2022. So the previous council had 5 priorities: economic development. They wanted to maintain a tax rate of $1.37. The development of a communications plan, succession planning, and climate change. The 3 priority investments we made them, and one of them was the development of the growth strategy that I prepared for the last council, and which this council has also listened to as well. Key investments included Business St. John. We wound down 4 different separate organizations and then stood them up in Envision St. John Regional Growth Agency into one agency. And I'm proud to say, we had a great meeting today. We were talking about KPIs and some of the ongoing business. It's been a year later, and it feels finally like we're doing the business of what Envision St. John is doing instead of all the governance and operational oversight that's required to start a new organization. So I'm very pleased with the progress that we've made. We've made transportation investment in roads and sewers, water sustainability. Council adopted the Parks and Recreation Master Plan at our last meeting. I'm pleased to say that we had, I think, a good council succession plan. There's an information session available for candidates. And then we had, I think in hindsight, we should call it boot camp for councillors to understand what's going on with the town, and also talk about governance and strategic planning. And as well, we had a long-term employee retire last year. I'd like to say that we've improved our communications council over the past year. However, what has been revealed is we have some flaws in our ability to improve our communications the way members of our community would like and what council would like. We've also taken positive steps through a pilot project down at the lagoon with a solar array to reduce greenhouse gases. And as ever, Bruce is still working on ensuring that we have the best infrastructure in the region. So what does this look like in your review? Our development officer is away on training. And what he'll tell you is that we, for the first time, had training for the members of our PAC. And they also addressed 17 issues, 17 items this past year. And also, as you can tell, we have some nice new apartment buildings going up as well. And, this is kind of funny, but we've had some unsightly premise issues that have been going on for, maybe a generation or two now. And we finally have action on that. So we're kind of celebrating a little bit. Also, building permits total $9 million. There's 72 building permits today, resulting in 41 new dwelling units. And there's a picture of the solar array that I spoke about. That was the pilot project, and that was a success. And now I'm going to turn this over to the chief, and he's going to brag about some of the good stuff that his department did this past year.
Your Worship, members of council, good evening. So yes, for the fire department in 2021, this is just a small sampling of some of the larger projects that we took on this year. The biggest one from both an operational impact as well as financial investment was our transition from our old VHF radio system to a new trunk mobile radio system. This is a provincial radio system, so we're able now to communicate with pretty much every agency, including provincial agencies like DTI. We can talk directly to the ferries if we need to, as well as all other fire departments, RCMP, Ambulance New Brunswick. We can all coordinate on one frequency and operate a scene that way. We also are still in the process, but we're refreshing the firefighters' lounge at station number 2, which has been in the kind of same state for probably 20 some years. Kitchen cabinets are kind of falling apart a little bit, so we're replacing a few of those and fixing up some floor. We were fortunate the gentleman who's doing the work has found a stove, and he's going to donate for free, so we'll get that installed as well. And then, as in the photo here, is our incident command cases. We updated these. We've had incident command in our department for many years, and we've tried out a few different systems. We've had these cases, a case similar to this for a number of years, but in this year we added the number of cases so that regardless of which chief officer arrives on scene, they'll have easy access to a case. And we also updated the timer and the actual sheets that they use kind of as a magnetic whiteboard for those types of things. So as I said, these are only a few of our things that have taken place. It also represents a very minor percentage of the portion of our budget. The vast majority of the fire department budget goes primarily to upkeep of equipment, investment in the volunteer firefighters in ways of recruitment and retention and recognizing the services that they provide. But as I say, equipment, apparatus maintenance is probably one of the biggest drivers for us. And so the second thing, I'll speak to EMO as well, is after many, many years of planning and working towards this, we do now have a generator installed in the back parking lot of this building that will basically allow the town and the Emergency Measures Operations Center to operate regardless of power outages. Right now, it'll be the only town-owned facility that actually has backup power, so that's a big bonus for us when we get into any extended power outages. And next up, I believe we'll go back to the CIO for General Government. Thank you.
Thank you, Troy.
Thank you, Troy. Really appreciate the work you and your department do, especially when it's at 4 o'clock in the morning or something like that. You have to be a special person to be a firefighter council. General government, it's been busy. These are some of the things that the town supports. I want to say last year expenditures increased about 1.2%. We also undertook a review of the finance operations of the town, and that's led to a number of recommendations, one of which was the hiring of the town's first chief financial officer. And I want to thank council for doing that. I think that's, in hindsight at the end of your term, we'll say that that's one of the best decisions that council made. So thank you. And I'd also like to acknowledge David Casey. David Casey has been a part of the budget process from the 1980s. And this is the first year since then that he hasn't been. And I'd just like to once again acknowledge and thank David Casey for the hard work that he's done for the town of here in Bay-Westfield. And of course, we support the different agencies and the Greater St. John Regional Facilities Commission. Also, some of the highlights were funding available to community groups. I think pretty much every school is on the list here, Your Worship. And also River Valley Coins, the Canadian Legion, Royal Canadian Legion, and then a couple of individuals who are doing stuff in the neighborhood or going to national competitions. And now I'm going to turn it over to our Recreation Director, Gary Clark, and he'll take you through his slides.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. A couple of highlights from the Recreation Department from 2021. First was the funding assistance that we provided to the River Valley Community Center for the partnership with the Boys and Girls Club of St. John to expand the programming for children and youth for the River Valley Youth Center. We also added a new sprayer to the splash pad, the flower sprayer. We also had the adoption of the Parks and Recreation Comprehensive Master Plan that RC Strategies says, and that's going to help guide decision making for the next 10 years. We also had a successful year with the Recreation Department to pivot to the COVID alerts. All 11 recreation park facilities were open and operating. We had some upgrades to this room, the Grand Bay room, with the addition of the lighting and the curtains to allow for the COVID presentation for council on broadcasting. And in the reorganization with the town departments, we now moved the Burning Point River Center with the Recreation Department. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. I know it could have been easy to do all of that through COVID. I appreciate the work.
Thank you.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity to do this little presentation. And again, you said it was new to myself as well, and really like it. So I guess with the Works Department, we are all over, and we do a number of things, and it's hard to kind of pinpoint into one, as Troy said. And I guess just as a piece of information for the Works Department, we've done at least over 1,000 individual tasks that needed scheduling since the beginning of the year. So that could be anything from the roadkill to doing, driveway culverts, potholes patching, but it requires resources to be scheduled and assigned. So we do a lot. But with that, and again on the operating side, this year in 2021, is we purchased a new bumper crane for the utility vehicle. That allows it goes on the back of a half ton. So it allows the vehicle to pick up pumps in the wet wells for the utility, which are down on the hole. So it allows them to pick that up, put them right on the truck, take them away for servicing. Then also we did replaced our SCADA computer system, which was computers from 2004. So they're outdated. So we got ourselves a new computer system. So put that in, I guess, just on the slide, it just shows something. But again, it allows the operation to alert us if there's a problem in advance, so that we can go take a proactive step to try and repair it instead of reactive if there's a problem afterwards. So hopefully, and again, we had that, but now we're just new and improved and it's working good. Another item that's not on there is the Works Garage, I guess 943 River Valley Drive, is we put asphalt shingles on that there this year because again, it was an older building and it was due for shingling. So I guess that was sort of on the operating side, and now this was on the capital side. I guess the major expenditures going through, and this year was sort of a carryover from last year where we started on Timberley Drive, We did some curbing in storm sewer that went up Timberley. Didn't complete it. This year we completed it from the top of Timberley to Birchie to fix the water problem at the end of Birchie. Put some curbing in through that, some soft spots in the soils. So we redid the road base where it needed to be and resurfaced it. So that was a good job, and it looks good. And also this year, again, we're trying to rehabilitate our roads as we go through, because that's part of keep good roads. And Highland Road, again, it was due for resurfacing through that. And again, because it was an older road, there's some soft spots, and we had to do 2,400 square feet that needed to be dug out and the road base was repaired. So that section of Highland Road went from Colonel Nace down to almost Hoyt. I guess down towards, I would call it lift station 9, but I know. So again, that was done there this year, which was good. And I believe the total was $587,000. So good year. All right. With that, thank you.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thanks, Bruce. Your Worship, the Works Department is very busy, as Bruce said. He has a ticket in his system somewhere for every one of those incidents, over 1,000 incidents that he was referring to. And some of them are done at the drop of a hat as well. And the Works Commissioner didn't mention it. He also changed the operations of the department this year. I think that was done in the spring, April, I think.
It was in the spring, yes.
Yeah, and we've noticed an improvement in service. So, and also an improvement in morale as well. Okay.
Thank you, Bruce.
So now the one that you've been waiting for, what are we doing this year? Or what are we doing next year? And so before we get to that, we'll just talk about how we came to this space. It started back in June. I think it was the beginning of June that we had boot camp. And, just trying to learn, what actually started before you guys were elected. Nicole and I went through every candidate's campaign literature. And we reviewed it. We tried to anticipate what are we going to be looking at for the next 4 years and how do we implement it. And so thank you for the good literature you provided. Everybody gave us something. And so it started there. We had council orientation. We went through a lot of strategic planning. We went through a lot of tactical planning. And then we also, thanks to the previous council, they started the Parks and Rec Master Plan, and we just adopted that. And that's included in the budget, Your Worship. We received some submissions. Also, internally, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out, what are our priorities? How are we moving forward? How can we do this? And if we do this, what about that? So we've had a lot of those internal discussions. We've also had some stakeholder meetings, particularly with the River Valley Community Center Foundation, and everybody may recall the Treasurer, John Roberts' presentation last time. Some council deliberations, especially, when we're talking about tactical plan, I know it's not the most interesting thing. I'm going to inflict it on you one more time yet, so, there you go. Then, the next step will be council approval, and then, of course, we have to submit this to the province by November 15th. So I'm going to introduce our new CFO, Greg Yeomans. Greg's been a great addition to the team. He brings a tremendous amount of municipal experience, and I really appreciated having his insight and wisdom here, and I think it shows up in different ways. So, Greg, I'll turn it over to you on variances. Old challenges is not referring to you, okay? These are new challenges for you.
Great. So you're part of the new meetings, Greg.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Thank you very much, and happy to be here. What we're going to look at first, we're going to talk later on in this presentation about the budget details in a little more depth. But as the Mayor alluded to earlier, there's some changes, some variances that are beyond the control of this municipality. So we thought we'd highlight those first. And I'm going to keep looking over here because I don't want to keep changing my glasses. I don't have bifocals or progressives. I don't do that. So I have regular glasses on now. We'll work with that. On here, what we've done, we've showed you the item, and we've showed you last year and this year and the change. And these are basically items that are beyond the control of the municipality. And I know that we could all read and citizens can read, but I think it's worthwhile to speak to what these are. So the first one is insurance, and it's across the board, it's liability, it's our buildings, it's our vehicles, it's all of it. So we've been advised that somewhere in the 15 to 25% range will be the increase. We haven't received the premium or the renewal contract at this point in time. So what we've done for this budget development is we've assumed the high end at 25%. So if it comes in less, we'll be able to shift that money somewhere else. Workers' health and safety, that saw a decrease in the rate this year, so we're seeing a reduction of about $4,600. The policing. Again, this is unknown at this point in time. RCMP provide the service here. There was a story by CBC a month or so ago, 6 weeks, talked about they're having their first ever collective agreement, and there's some retroactive component of that. So they talked about 22 or 23% over 6 years. The information we have, we've assumed a 3.95% increase in our budget document. Later on, we'll show you some sensitivity analysis. If that goes higher, what it would mean to our budget and our tax rate. Regional Facility Commission, gone down a little bit, $11,000. Visit St. John, the other way, so there's just about come out neutral. Development incentives. Snow and ice control. So we contract out that service, and it was a 5-year contract with 2 years renewal option. We're in that first year. This is a contracted arrangement, so there's no renegotiation. That's the increase for this year. Development incentives is that 2019, the Council of Grand Bay came up with a program to encourage incentives. And based on increase in assessed value, people are entitled to a grant. So based on what we know is in the hopper or in the process today, that if everything came to fruition in 2022, we'd spend out $90,000 in grants. But knowing how projects take time, and it could be over a couple of years, we're going to smooth that out. So we're putting some in this year, and then we'll up that budget again next year. And again, that's to spur development along Colonel Nace Boulevard and others. That this is your agenda. This is what we want to do. We want to grow our community to enhance our sustainable tax base. So that's that one, and then property assessment. The province does all the assessment values for service New Brunswick. So if our assessment base goes up, our fee goes up. They charge, I think, 2% fee for that. And as a taxpayer, you've probably all seen on your tax bill a similar 2% there. So that's the money they take to run this. And some people might think, well, that's exorbitant. But if you look at municipalities and other provinces, they do the assessing, they do the billing, they do the collection, they eat the bad debts. So it's an administrative. It's not just creating assessment, they do the whole 9 yards. So in my opinion, I think that's a reasonably good deal for the town. And if we had to put that infrastructure in place, we need to be able to build the software and do all those things that they do on our behalf today. So it's not just doing the assessment, it's a range of services they perform on our behalf. So that's a total of $129,000 that are really beyond our control. Our increase in our net expenditures is $300,000. So 43% of our increased budget costs are items that are outside the control of the town. Sorry, keep saying county. Previous life, John alluded to lots of municipal experience. It's a generous way of saying that I'm old and old challenges here. So I don't like to use old challenges as recurring challenges. Would be how I like to phrase it. But we are where we are.
I have a quick question
Sure.
on the insurance. Does that include cyber insurance?
Yes, it does.
Particularly with what happened in St. John and Brunswick and what's currently happening in St. John's, Newfoundland. I just wanted to make sure that we had that in there, and John.
Sorry, Madam Mayor and Council. We purchased cyber insurance. Actually, it started the request for it before what happened in St. John. And so we were able to get it. I'd just like to note, there's a number of factors that are leading to what's called in the insurance industry a hard market, where it's difficult to get insurance. And that's, there's more civil litigation or litigation against municipalities. There's more claims for a variety of reasons. Some of it's climate change. There's a host of factors that are leading to it. Also, within the industry, there's less insurance companies who are providing insurance for municipalities. And so that also firms up prices, but they also expect to make a certain amount of profit. And that's an issue that, so a municipality in Alberta may cause a problem, and then we may have to pay our little bit to bump that up. I'd just like to assure council that, or remind council, maybe better, that UMB supported and passed our resolution to look at other risk management possibilities for the municipality.
Yes, and if that does come to fruition, it'll give us more control over costs and level of service.
That's right. Sorry, Craig.
Oh, thank you. And just, Mayor and Council, that we don't have the premium of the cyber insurance yet, but we did have a conversation, our folks with people do that, and they've seen a 400% increase in the claims in the last year. So for those folks who know or don't know insurance, premiums are driven by claims experience. And so we can expect, we built again an increase in here, back to 25%, but the policy isn't seeming large at that point in time. So again, big percentages and small numbers, but it's still, we need to keep an eye on that and be planning going forward how we protect against those things. In our regular insurance liability, municipalities are easy targets. So, and insurers quite often are happier to just settle out of court and end up in a big battle. So there's lots of risk and exposure there, but we are monitoring it and tracking it at the CAO.
So I'd just like to add, Your Worship, the weakest link in cybersecurity is me and my colleagues around the table. So we have taken lunch and learns to learn about cybersecurity and what to do. And I've changed the number of policies since I've started to enhance cybersecurity. So I'm saying here that we're doing what we can. I can't promise council that we won't be hacked. We've done everything I think that's reasonable, and we'll continue to do best practices, but I can't promise we won't be hacked.
Thank you, John.
So this next slide, these are the things you just saw on the previous slide are included in here, but these are also the key budget impacts for the year going forward. And rather than me keep looking over there, I'll lie, change my mind, put my reading glasses on so I can see here. So we talked about the insurance. On the legislative side of things, there was a court council orientation in 2021 that comes out for the current year. We'll have to go back in a couple of years, and we've talked previously about how we might mitigate that and smooth that out. But for this year, it's down. Same as new council, again, refreshing technology. There's a savings from last year to this year. The general government, as CEO alluded to, our wages are up. We brought myself on board, and we're looking at a communications officer, so that will change things. We have office equipment, enhance the website. Our management plan, we've reduced the budget on that by $30,000. As we increase the capacity of our staff, we will not need outside resources to help us plan and organize things. So I think you're recognizing a savings right there. Talked about regional facilities. We reduced the council discretionary budget. We've talked about the police contract and the property assessment. Page 2 of this, looking down here, nothing that jumps out hugely in my mind that we haven't talked about already, but if there's a particular item here you'd like to ask about, we will go down to fiscal services. CAO had alluded to debt and those type of things. So once we're into borrowing for facilities or for equipment and things, when you not picking on fire, but a new fire truck, you buy a truck, it's about $750,000, somewhere in that range for a piece of equipment that's going to meet our needs. So you just don't pull it out of your operating budget and pay for it. You either plan for it or borrow for it and fund it over the life of that asset, which is common practice. You'll see in your financial statements when they come out, tangible capital assets and depreciation of the same. So you look at the life of a vehicle, you look at the life of a building, different lives, and you amortize it over that. And there is precedent or reasonableness that you fund them over that same duration, particularly in a government environment where that citizens today, but also 10, 20 years from now, are going to have the benefit of those facilities and equipment. So you don't want to charge all that cost of today's citizens. The phrase that's come up in the last couple of years is intergenerational equity. So people who are using it pay for a component of it. but you also want to be prudent in managing your debt and your operating expenses. And as the CEO alluded to, our debt service ratio is somewhere in the 5% range. That's very reasonable for government, for operating. I ain't political, so I'm not liberal, conservative, or anybody else. But when Paul Martin became Minister of Finance a number of years ago, the debt service cost of the country of Canada was in the 33% range. And what that means is that 33 cents of every dollar would go to service the debt. So he took that on when he came in. He did great things to reduce that. But again, a lot of work you'll see, capital side, we talked about the sewage piece. A lot of that infrastructure is underground, but it's very, very costly. So we'll borrow, but we will be prudent in managing our debt and ensuring that you're aware of what our debt situation is, the impact on our budget, and where we go. Within the provincial guidelines that are there, the town can borrow, have outstanding debt at any one point in time up to 6% of its assessed value. So that would be somewhere in the $23, $24 million range. We're nowhere near that, nor do we want to be there. The guidelines also talk about how much debt service would be reasonable for a municipality. So 10 or 15%, you get above 15, the province starts getting nervous, your ability to pay. We're well within those constraints. And if we decide to go higher, we'll help you understand what that means. But if our debt service ratio for some reason happened to go from 5% to 10% and your revenue stayed the same, now what you're doing is you're putting upward pressure on your tax rate or downward pressure on your service. So we're fully cognizant as an organization and administration of that issue, and we do nothing without informing you and guiding you. And as you can see the last two lines here, we're transferring money to an operating reserve, which is like a rainy day fund. So if we had something that popped up that we hadn't planned for, we wouldn't have to have negative impact on the budget necessarily. And then also general capital expenditures. We move money into a capital reserve that as we need capital, we use that money for some of it and we borrow for others as the case may be. So those are the key highlights at this point in time. I did allude to policing cost sensitivity analysis. So the top line here shows our 2021 budget, and if our 3.95% estimate is correct, that it would result in a $28,540 increase in policing costs, 3.95%, or 0.6553 cents on the tax rate. Now that's built into our tax rate, which we'll go back to later on, but it is going to propose to stay at $1.37. But if for some reason the increase was 5%, we'd see an incremental of $7,940, or 0.18 cents. So this shows you sensitivity up to 15%. My understanding from the CAO, where he met yesterday at the province, is that, and we've been contacting them frequently, they're still waiting on the numbers to come in. And the situation is that the RCMP have now a collective agreement and negotiated wages that they haven't had before. It's been coming for several years. So we've talked to the province. They have indicated they've been putting a little bit away every year so that we don't take the whole hit in the first year. But we'll have to wait and see what those numbers look like and do a little more work with them. But this gives you an idea of what it might look like if we're beyond the 3.95% we saw. But again, if that's the case, we'll be back to you speaking about how we mitigate that additional increase and what it might be. So I'll stop there and pass it back to the CEO. If there's any questions, I can answer those before we do that.
Thank you, Greg. I just wanted to highlight that this is one of those uncontrolled costs that are completely out of our hands. And at this point in time, we have an estimate to what it might be, but it could be higher, depending on what the province comes back to us with. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg. Now, how do we implement council's strategic plan? And that's what we're going to try and address. And I'm just going to go through some highlights right now, what we plan to do. And, there's some great news there, and there's also stuff we don't always like to do. What we're proposing, effective January 1, 22, is the suspension of frontage fees on Colonel Nays Boulevard. We're proposing that they be suspended for 3 years, that there's definitely a sunset clause on there, and that's to help facilitate development along Colonel Nays. It's been a long time, and it'd be nice to see some buildings go up there, Your Worship. Also, we've already undertaken the development of a local economic development plan, and we expect to be able to see implementation of that begin in 2022. As has been alluded to, one, because even though we had a communications plan for 21, I do think that we did enhance communications. It was nowhere to meet, I think, anybody in this room's expectations of satisfaction. And really the deficiency in being able to be successful with the plan was just muscles. We need someone to be able to help. It takes a lot of time to be able to do a good job and a timely job. And also per the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, we're looking at bringing in a recreation liaison person to work with stakeholders, community groups, to ensure that we can enhance the community life here in the town, which is part of the community vitality scope that is expected. Unfortunately, Your Worship and Council, we can't do all these things because of financial constraints, and the decision has been made that in order to shift into the direction that Council like to go, we have eliminated that position. We're also investing in the River Valley Community Center through the strategic plan and operational analysis or review. And the timeline for that is late winter. And the intent there is to be able to have the current board review it and take steps to implement those things that are relevant and timely, so that those who want to stand for election in the next year for 22-23 will understand the direction that the organization is going. So that covers that. And then I just want to speak to about Greg a little bit, the Chief Financial Officer. Part of the, when I arrived here, I had some concerns. And so what we're doing over the next year with Greg's assistance and experience, we're going to review the level of service that we're providing. That's for the departments here as well as the fire department. We want to review snow and ice control that expires in 23, I believe. However, we need lead time to determine which is the most cost-effective route to go. Should we be contracting that out, as has been going on for 15, 20 years, if not more? Or should we be bringing that in-house? Or do we even have a choice, because no one bids on the snow and ice control contract? So we need a minimum 18 months lead time to figure that all out, because if there's a purchase of equipment, for example, you just don't have a snow removal and ice control fleet overnight. That takes lead time and it takes money, which Greg he can talk to you a lot about. So those are some of the things that Greg is doing, as well as we're reviewing our municipal software. It's not the typical type of software used by municipalities across the country, and there are some things that we'd like to identify that it can do or not do for our needs. One of the things that we hope to introduce to Council, either before Christmas, but I'm anticipating will be after the new year, is a multi-year budget. It's a little, I'm just going to say uncomfortable doing budgets in isolation. I like to know what the impact is down the road. So we want to do some of that prudent financial planning, so that when Council makes a decision, you're not making it in a vacuum, but you're making it as well aware as we can reasonably be, because there's always things that we don't anticipate. We work in a complex environment, but how can we try to understand it as well as we can? So we'll be introducing multi-year budgets coming up. And as well, of course, local government reform initiatives will be launched. We're anticipating that we'll know what those are in November, and until then, as I mentioned earlier, it's going to be mindful indifference. Okay. So, Your Worship, if there's no questions.
Well, I just want to say there's a lot to unpack in those last two slides.
Yes.
The temporary suspension of frontage fees, that sunset clause to spur development. The municipal services review, so we can really determine whether we're providing services in the most effective and efficient way for the taxpayer dollar. local government reform. I mean, that's 2 slides, but there's a lot going on.
There's a lot of highlights there.
Yeah.
And, sorry, Councillor.
No, finish.
Sorry.
I was just gonna follow up with that. Could you just explain briefly how the suspension of frontage fees might look? Like how they might look to developers or?
Oh, sorry, okay. Yeah, right now, the business community really sees development in Grand Bay-Westfield as difficult. And we've been trying to do stuff on the administrative end to clean that up. However, the frontage fees, they've been in place since Colonel Nace was built, but there's a mindset or a perception, I think is maybe a better word, that the frontage fees cover all development in Grand Bay-Westfield and that they're cost prohibitive. And, in talking with realtors, I know of one deal that died because of the perception of the way the frontage fees are used and collected. So by removing them, we're going to, one, get rid of that barrier, and two, what's going to happen is that the price of property will appear to be less, because right now, the way the property is marketed, it's marketed at market value, which includes, infrastructure support, and then the frontage fees are tacked on top of that, like a penalty. Whereas the intent, and I think rightly understood, the current pricing, I may argue, on Colonel Nays is artificial, because the frontage fees were in place to recoup money for the infrastructure construction. And so the prices are actually inflated, but that doesn't matter in the market. People see what they want to see, and now it's been so long, it's just kind of a written in stone type of thing. So there's a number of things we need to do from an economic development perspective to change people's minds. And one of them is removing the frontage fees. But I would encourage council that, it's not usual for a municipality to build infrastructure like that on its own. Usually it's the developer who has a vision and a plan, but in this case, the town did it. And we really need to, and we ought to recoup our costs, but let's give the frontage fees a vacation and say, you know what, we will absorb the costs, we won't pass them on to you. We think that the growth that is there will, in time, pay us back. But we need to get there. The frontage fees have been there for more than 10 years. They're not working. We might as well not even bother collecting frontage fees for all the frontage fees we're collecting now, right? There's going to be no difference, except hopefully there's going to be businesses and homes and everything else up there. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, John.
All right, anything else?
No.
Okay. So I'm going to go through the tactics, and so with the strategic plan, we had 4 priorities, and then we have some council committees to address them, and councillors to champion them. And within each priority, we've identified a number of tasks or action items that we can take. Another term, if you're living in St. John or if you're watching St. John, is what's the work plan? This is just, they're all the same thing, just with different names. And the ones that you're seeing here tonight, I'm not going to read them all because I won't last the evening. All the ones that you see here have been incorporated into the budget. And I also just want to let council know that from an administrative perspective, we're excited because this is great stuff. We get to be a part of change. On the other side, we're a little bit maybe some of us are a little bit more than a little bit nervous because it's very ambitious. And we're going to do our best to fulfill these. But anyways, the first tactic for population growth to achieve financial sustainability is to advocate for the province to enhance educational facilities and to partner for multi-purpose uses. So in a nutshell, how do we advocate? Who do we partner with? Can we have partnerships on the facilities? Where I've come from, we used to partner with schools, have common booking systems for the gym for after school hours and stuff like that. And that's not really the case here. Some schools do that and some don't. Anyway, so we're advocating with the province, and I'm happy to share with the public, Your Worship, that I know that you've been meeting with the MLA, you've been talking with ministers on an informal basis, and I do know that our MLA has been bringing cabinet ministers down here to tour the facilities. And I just want to give my hats off to Inglewood School. They've done a great job. I've only read reports of what the school condition is. I was finally able to go over there, and I was pleasantly surprised. My only fear is she did too good of a job. The second one is, how do we attract or retain families from across Canada and the world? And there's a number of things that we can do that. And we're trying that by becoming culturally sensitive. There will be an issue for item for council on Monday about professional development for staff around diversity and racism. But these are the different things, and this is something that we'll work with Envision St. John to complete as well. And that was actually one of the topics we discussed today, was international students. Yeah, so actually, that item 1-2, attract and retain families, as you can see, there's a lot of stuff there.
Yeah.
A lot of tasks. 1.3, we want to partner with relevant agencies to encourage international immigrants to relocate to Grand Bay-Westfield. We've identified partners, and I've already been working with the YMCA a little bit, and I believe, Your Worship, attending an approved event. I forgot the date, right? I want to say the 19th, but I don't hang my hat on it.
Yeah.
Okay. 1.4, going back to the question about the development fees about the frontage fees on Colonel Nays. How do we attract developers to build diversity of housing options? So, we're going to be hosting open houses, removing the fees. We're partnering with Hampton in the spring to do a first impressions. So what will happen is the core leadership team here will be traveling to Hampton for the day, going through a visual of the town and looking at what happens in the background that people don't see. What can we learn from them? And then likewise, when Richard and his team come here, what are some of the things on first impression that we can improve? And also maybe there's something we're doing in the back end that he's interested in. And I do know, because I do brag about Cascade software, that he really wants to see that. So there are things that we are doing to attract developers, and we haven't done enough yet, but we will be doing more, Your Worship. And there's 2 slides of that. So 1.5, how do we work towards a more diverse tax base that supports the conveniences and amenities needed by our residents? And I guess I'd just like to assure our residents that council has made it very clear that we're founded as a cottage country, and that one of the things that people really like about living here is that cottage feel. And so any type of economic development has to support that. We can't change the character. If you think of the movie It's a Wonderful Life, you have these 2 visions, with Jimmy Stewart's character, where they live in, I forgot the name now, something Falls, where it's this idyllic little town where people get along and grow. And people want that idyllic community, but on the other hand, when Jimmy Stewart is being escorted by the angel out, what is it like if I'm not here? And you have this bustling, thriving community of Pottersville, with also the yellow the ugly underbelly of it. Well, I guess I want to assure that as the CAO, I'm sensitive that, we need economic development. I'm very concerned about sustainability. It bothers me to no end that 98% of our tax base is residential, because a healthy proportion is 80-20, but people don't want Pottersville. But we need aspects of Pottersville. We need the bistros, we need the cafes, we need the conveniences of being able to go to the grocery store. Our young people need a place to go and hang out that's healthy and constructive. So that's the type of economic development that I understand in talking with my neighbors and talking with people that I see around town, and especially listening to the council, that we have to walk that line. We have to hold this tension between, I wish I could remember the name of the community in Pottersville from It's a Wonderful Life. So the second one is organizational capacity. And I should just give a shout out first to population growth that Councillor Jim Balcom is the lead champion on that, supported by Councillor John Billmans. And, I just wanted to assure the two councillors that you're going to get really busy in the new year. So just please be patient. Be mindfully indifferent right now, if I can put it that way. Our next priority is championed by the Deputy Mayor, Erin Toole, and it's been a pleasure getting to work with her a little bit. So our first thing is ensure council processes and decisions are communicated clearly and timely to residents. And I think we've been doing that in fits and starts. I'm not satisfied with how well we've been doing it. I think it's an improvement when I first came here, but it's not where it should be. And at the end of next year, I'm hoping that we're going to be awfully close to that point. I don't want to promise we will be there, but we'll have made significant strides to achieve that. And again, it comes back to transparency and again, the Cascade software, which I think significantly informs council. And hopefully in 23 or 24, we can make that software public and get you onto it at the end of 22 or into 23. Develop a communication strategy. This is the common theme. The Deputy Chief and I, after we get over the madness of the budget, will be sitting down, coming up with what would be a tactical plan or a work plan for a communications person. We want them to hit the ground running instead of sitting at the desk scratching their head thinking, I wonder what I should do first. We want them to be productive, we want them to be successful, and we want council's decisions to be out in the community. Organizational capacity, I've referenced this already, completed a comprehensive review of municipal services, including contracting versus in-house. In coming here, I was very astonished how much we contract out. And that's not to say they're doing a bad job. I have lots of respect for the work that's squeaky clean and Shades Green. I was going to say Shady Acres, but I know that's wrong. Shades Green do. You know, the stuff. Did I hit something? Okay. Our stuff looks great. I think we are a beautiful town. And I think every once in a while we have to ask the hard question. Are our taxpayers getting the bang for the buck? And I'm not casting aspersions on our contractors. They do great work. This is just an honest question that we have to ask periodically. That's all we're doing, and we're not taking a bias into the discussion. The chief is going to be taking a review of the fire department, and he's developed a strategic plan. This is part of it. And one of I think the fundamental way that any council controls the cost of the fire department is by predetermining what the level of service is. And that's what this review is going to do. And once we get to that, and I don't need to pick on the chief, but just for council's information as well as the public, if the chief comes to us and says, oh, you know what, a ladder truck, we need a ladder truck because, you know, Dave, he got a building plan for a 4-story building, but we can't support it, so I should get a ladder truck. Well, no, we come back to the chief and we say, you know what, why don't you talk with St. John? You know, maybe we can get up some agreement, and then as we understand where we're at, then we can come up. Or another thing is, you know what, we're spending way too much money on fire. All we want you to do is make sure that the house on the south side and the north side don't burn down. Just let that one burn down. That's a level of service. Most people don't like that one, but that's just an example of a level of service in the fire department. And then, of course, we have to make sure we have the capacity to implement the Parks and Recreation plan. And advocate for province-level local government reform. And we had a good discussion with the acting deputy minister. Most of this is pretty much done. The next phase will just be, do we really want this? Do we really want this? Provision of relevant and timely financial information to inform decision making. We're already taking steps with the development of a multi-year budget, monthly reports and variances. Greg's already given me a great overview of where we've been, and reports. Then the third one is championed by, I'm going to say, our longest-serving councillor, Councillor Beverly Day. Yep. And it's infrastructure sustainability and climate adaptation. And so really what we're doing, and Chris has been doing this more or less over the years, is reviewing the asset management plan with an emphasis on life cycle planning. And we want to run that through the whole organization, including our facilities. And one of the things we've already done towards that, and we're still waiting to report here in November, is the condition assessment on the central.
So John, maybe for the people that are watching that might not know what life cycle planning is, would you mind defining that?
Oh, sure. Well, I think if I talk my way through it, instead of defining it, might be better. Let's say, for an example, that council wants to build a pool. And we have some eager people in the community say, you know what, we'll fundraise the $8 million. That's a reasonable price, by the way, for an outdoor swimming pool. So they'll say, yeah, we can raise the $8 million. Well, what people often forget is that the $8 million is the sexy part. That's the honeymoon. The marriage is that how do we keep the thing running for 40 years? How much is that going to cost? And just typically, and I'm not going to get into details, but the rule of thumb is your capital investment is 10%, could be 8%, could be 15%. Your capital investment, that $8 million that people want to fundraise, is just 10% of the operational cost of the life of that asset. Because there's going to have to be ongoing maintenance. After 10, 15, 20 years, it's going to need a major upgrade because the technology changes. And then after 30 years, we have to prop this up, prop that up. And then at the 40-year mark, do we want to, destroy it and build a new one, or should we pump more money into it? That's the life cycle, is taking an asset right from the beginning. When you initially design it, that's the most important work. Good design eliminates a lot of future problems. Right up until, how are we going to decommission this thing?
Thank you, John.
Okay. Ensure the town's groundwater is sustainable. We run a whole system. One of the things that's been identified to me by various people in the region is concern about water. And so we're taking studies to ensure that if an institution wants to come here in business, that they'll have a strong quantity and quality of water. And my tax, I know somebody had asked me in the past, what does my tax mean? My tax is the mathematics of information technology and complex system. It's a program set up by the federal government to undertake projects like ours, and we're just hoping that we can find people to do it. Determine a carbon neutral master plan in conjunction with the town's climate change action plan. And so our next stage is the solar array at the lagoon is what we're proposing. Community vitality is championed by Councillor Stephanie McIntosh Lawrence. People may know her of the great photo op opportunity at Unity Park. Implement comprehensive recreation master plan. I think we should just do a full stop there. There's a lot of stuff, and we've already taken steps to be able to implement this, Your Worship, and including stuff that you see Monday night. As an example, we're suggesting to council that you allow us to flatten the fee structure for all of our facilities. So it doesn't matter if you rent the Brundage Point River Center or if you want to rent the Pandemic room upstairs, you're going to pay the same price. Also, Your Worship and Council, we're also suggesting that this room should be designated as a council and board room and no longer rented out. We have meetings here pretty much every day, I think, or somebody does. As well, our council meetings are in here all the time. And, we've tried to convert this to a digital boardroom. So that's something we're going to ask you to consider. I don't know how the public will receive that because this has been a public access room. But by opening up the River Center at the same rate as all the other rooms available, we're hoping that people say, I'd much rather be down there, get a view, get nice windows, get nice hardwood floors, all that type of stuff.
It's more accessible and there's good parking.
Yeah, accessibility is the key thing. Here, I think it's 17 steps in the back to come here, down into this space, and out front to use the Pandemic room, it's 16 steps. Is that right, Gary?
18 and 16, 18 back, 16 front.
I stand corrected. Thank you, Gary. So we're hoping, again, one of the key features of the Parks and Rec Master Plan is accessibility, inclusiveness, and people with arthritis can't do the steps, and we're not being very inclusive. We want to be more engaged, hence, a recreation liaison person. And also communicating more. It's a common theme in the stuff that we've learned from the public when we did the online survey during the election, the Parks and Rec Master Plan, and of course from council. I continue going on here, Your Worship, about just the Parks and Rec Master Plan. One of the highlights is developing an outdoor recreation feasibility study for our community beach and hand launch. And that's just a study to see whether or not it's something we can do. Right now, the town, I wish David was here, but we don't really have any beachfront property. We have some shoreline, but that's different, and it has accessibility issues. And we want to change how we're making decisions and working with stakeholder groups. We have a framework that we want to follow, and Your Worship, we've already identified a test project with ATVs, because that's come up, and that's actually a lingering issue from last winter, and it's been brought up again in anticipation of winters. We skipped over 4.2. I don't remember what it is offhand, but we're not doing that point this year. And then we want to become a center of wellness with a diversity of health professionals. And that's also about economic development council. Any questions about the tactical plan? I know the board you once with it, Black and Yellow Council were the once with it. But all the things that are listed here today are in the budget in one form or another.
Yeah, it's like my father says, it's how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? We have a very ambitious agenda and a tactical plan. Even the parts that we're doing are still quite ambitious. But as with the Parks and Rec Master Plan, we can't do it all in 1 year, but it looks like we're going to attempt to do a lot.
Yes. Greg, you up next? I forgot.
I thought you were
Good. Technical review was my mistake. So I'm going to turn over the next part to our new Chief Financial Officer, and excuse me, he's going to speak to that. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. B-team now, consider something like that. So let's see what we can do. So this says a revenue comparison. What this really is non-tax revenue. So we have three pieces of non-tax revenue. One of them is sale of goods and services, and that includes such things as fire department services to outlying communities, those type of things, ambulance service. Other revenue we'll elaborate on later on, and then surplus second previous year, and that's a difficult concept for people who don't know the budget. But for instance, if we have an operating surplus in 2020, let's say it was $100,000, well, that doesn't just go where we want it. The province has rules that carries forward to your second following year and becomes your first revenue item there. Same as if you have a deficit. And the reason it's the second following year is by the time you get that year done, you're in the middle of next year already. So those are non-tax revenue components. And as we move forward in the presentation, we'll elaborate on those a little more. This graphic, it's difficult to show, but I think what it really does, it highlights the CEO's comment that how reliant we are on property tax revenue as a revenue source for our community. And so if you look at these are the various types here, recreation and building permits, those type of things, and how little they all are. I think the second biggest revenue, other than the community funding grant, is the local service district revenue for the fire department. Everything else is less than $25,000, and then we have the community funding grant, which we spoke about earlier, that went down by $335,000, or 56%. And then we see the money we're going to raise through taxation at $6 million. So as the CEO alluded to, as we can shift away from that reliance on residential property taxes That'll help us do what we're doing. And again, as we expand services in the community, we'll see these other types of revenue grow as well. This is expenditures by the various functional areas, transportation being the largest, but of course that takes care of your road plowing, snow, ice control, summer maintenance and those things. So it's a big part of what your community is. Fire, policing, the fiscal is your debt, and again, that's a little misleading, the size of it, because we're taking this year about $850,000 out of your budget to fund capital. And so that's a little misleading showing on a graphic representation, but those are where the expenditures get spent. And this next slide shows you the dollars and percentages by department. Again, it's just to give you a flavor for where the money's going. General government includes a whole lot of things, and we'll kind of get to there a little bit later on what we're doing. So the next area is capital, and
Greg, I just have a quick question.
Sure, sorry.
If we, I don't know if you can answer this right here, but if we take out those uncontrolled costs, about how much between 2021 and 2022 is the average difference in percentage?
average percentage, sorry, they were about $130,000 of our $300,000 increase,
Right.
about 43%. But at $129,000, okay, so I don't like to do math in my head, but let's say 130, and, right, and $4,000 is our 1 cent of the tax rate, so maybe about 2.5 cents of the tax rate driven by those uncontrolled costs. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, thank you.
And please don't quote me on those, I can go back, I had to get my spreadsheet
I
up.
know a lot of math on the fly, so
Yes, 43,550.
43,550
For a penny, yeah.
into your, whatever, that 130, so, maybe 3 cents, order of magnitude.
So our growth this year has raised what we're getting in for 1 cent from 35,000 to 44,000.
43,550, so I don't have the number for last year, but if you say it's 35, I'll be there with you. Because if we look at the growth of the assessment base and our $1.37 tax rate, that generated about $628,000 in additional revenue. But because we lost $335,000 on the grant funding, our new revenue is about $300,000. And that, we'll elaborate to that later on in the presentation, but you're right. So,
Because people have always wondered why we didn't put our tax rate up. And I know in other communities right now, they're lowering the tax rate. And realistically, the revenue isn't there really for raising it 1 penny. I mean, it's 44,000. And if you try to pave the street, that still won't cover the cost of paving the street.
and
So,
if I might, Your Worship, that's true. And so that becomes the challenge that you already identified, facing. How do we grow this? So that 1% tax increase, to the council's point, doesn't generate enough revenue to do anything. So if we're going to do something substantive, we need a big increase. But again, and this is a perspective that I've had from many years of doing this type of work in municipal government, the tax rate is not the metric. Because each of you own a home, you can look at your house here and let's assess that. And why that becomes challenging to have that tax rate comparison of the communities. Don't look at a house that's 200 here and 200 there. Take the house that's here for $200,000. What does that identical building cost in Fredericton, Moncton, St. John, or anywhere else? And you'll see a difference in assessment. So what you really want to understand is what is the property tax burden on that property that you're paying here? You can identify that pretty easy. But that same property in Moncton, Fredericton, or anywhere else, it's going to have a different assessment value and multiply by their tax rate, and you will see what we call the property tax burden, what that, as you as a taxpayer pay. And unfortunately, the focus in this province and in a lot of provinces is that tax rate. But it's really misleading because you don't care what the tax rate is, you care what your property tax is. And they're a factor, but it's not the only factor, and that's where we get lost. And so when you go and talk to the province about funding, they're going to say, well, your tax rate's lower than 80% of the people in the province, or, everybody else lowered the tax rate and you didn't. Well, that assessed values are the critical piece in what you're doing. And it's also critical in growing your budget by growing your tax base. But non-residential has to be a component of that, and non-residential has components. There's commercial, there's industrial, and those have their own. Commercial is one thing, but as you start delving into industrial properties, that becomes a whole PAC issue on its own. I think Councillor Balcom, you're on that committee.
Yes.
And I recall from my days in the city of St. John, looking at industrial zoning and those applications, and it's that whole not in my backyard idea, right? And I've been away for a number of years, but I remember they built a facility on the waterfront on the west side. It was a metal crushing, or the grief that caused the council of the day and ongoing, So these are problems that, when you start looking at those factors, will be a big decision piece for the people around this table, meaning you elected officials, how we go where we want to be, but don't destroy the soul of our community. Sorry, a little long-winded, but all right.
Thank you, Rick.
So it's my understanding that the deputy CEO is under the capital. Is that correct?
I think you're gonna speak to the chart though, aren't you? Capital revenue by source.
I can do that, sure.
And then after that will be the Works Commissioner one, the
Okay.
street improvements.
All right. So people think that about capital, this is all whether it's buildings or significant vehicles. There's some standards in public sector accounting standards that we operate by for financial reporting, that anything that's under $10,000 is not a capital item. But again, you can think about computers. So you might have a computer that's $3,000. It's not capital, but if you buy 30 computers. So there's different pieces there. But capital is what you buy, and a capital, this is how we fund it, is the revenue source here. So when you look at your operating budget, it says capital reserve transfer. That's not a capital payment. That's a component of how you fund your capital program. So you'll see in the budget when it comes through that we're probably talking like $1.8 million in capital for this year. So some of that will come from gas tax funding, some of it will come from reserve, some will come from other sources, and this is basic sources we have here. And so the first one, $98,000, that work was planned to be done last year, so we put money aside for it. It wasn't done, so that carries forward into the reserve, and additional money will come forward for the work this year. Total is $248, $150 from this year funding, $98 from last year's funding. Gas tax funding, and there's a gas tax funding top-up coming this year that'll allow us to do some more. And then debenture borrowing, so you'll see in your capital that there's a structure based on the sewage treatment plant that needs to be replaced, and it's not just a structure. Your Commissioner Worsh will speak to that. That's $100,000. We'll probably borrow for that because it's a long-term piece, and you can't fund it out of the utility, the sort of operating budget, and then the revenue from your transfer from your operating to your capital reserve, and then the phrase you hear is pay as you go, and that's a dynamic that you pay for your capital of your operating budget. But again, then you have this intergenerational equity conversation, and if you try to, as an individual, if you try to save up to buy a house, you're going to save a long time before you buy that house. So you buy that house today and you live in it for 25 years with a mortgage that will be 10, 15, 20 years, and that's affordability and how you do those things. So those are the things that, how you fund your capital program, and your capital is actually what you do with that, your assets. Any questions or thoughts on that, or ideas?
Just, I like how you explain that intergenerational equity. It's like using that's how you fund things that future taxpayers are going to use and benefit from.
Right. Okay. This is just the invested by the various areas. So again, transportation is the key component of what we do, and your Commissioner will speak to that, but you can see the breakdown here. I'll have to put on the other glasses here to read the numbers on the screen, sorry. So we're going to see $700,000 in transportation, $190 in EMO, and environmental development is $420. A big piece of that will be the solar array. It's going to be related to the sewer utility, but it's more an operational environmental piece that we're doing it for. Recreation, some building work, fire, that 35, Chief will speak to it, but as we do the service review, things we identify in there that may be needed, this is some other funding for that, and general government is some software and some other pieces in there. So I've probably spoken for some of those people, I'm sorry for that, but it's hard to speak to this and not speak to the details. So, I'll leave that to your works commissioner, thank you very much. Put my mask on here before I escape.
Streets, gotta love them, love them. Cost money. Of course, I think you might want to get that up. But yes, for our street improvements, this year we've already come to council and we're looking at these projects. We're continuing, we've had done for years, we do our, used to be annual, but now it's every 3 years, a street condition report. So we're following that, and these are our top ranked streets that need some work. So with that, we had some resurfacing on Broad Street, Kirkley, doing from Central to Apple Hill. And again, they have the top ranking, which is why they're being selected, and the street condition report is on our website if you wish to go. And then Majestic and Sunset, similar. Lakeview, we wanted to do Lakeview this year, but when we did the investigation, we ran into some land issues. So we're putting some money aside to look after the land issues, so then we can do that hopefully next year. Look after that. Chestnut, we have a box culvert that needs some stabilization there, big storms and rain, it's weakening in there, so we need to do some more on that. Brandy Point Road, we have a culvert that needs adjustment on that, so we're going to do, or talk with DFO and Department of the Environment, because again, we'll fish passageway or whatever to see if there's something we can do down there. So that's what we're looking at for street improvements.
Bruce, I just want to highlight that the street condition report is key in determining the street work priorities. It's not arbitrary.
No, it's not arbitrary.
At all. No. So, and I just thought that for some people don't understand how that works. Maybe you could explain just a little bit about that street condition report and how things are graded so that people know why these come to the top.
Right, I was going to just maybe expand on that a little bit there. Yeah, so we have the Dillon Consulting. They've gone around, or they have gone around, they've been doing it for years, and they inspect every street, and they give the street an actual ranking from 1 being good, 5 being bad. So we've been doing that over years. Our 5s are off the list. I like it. So now we're moving along. So we're doing that. Now, the other component, because if everything was good, you just go line by line by line. But if it's a $200,000 job and you only have $100,000, you can't do that. And then the other part that sometimes, so again, the top 2 or 5, I'll say, sometimes get moved around depending on what they're doing. And an example through here is we have a lot of asphalt work. So we wish to keep the asphalt projects so we have a larger volume, better price, and not necessarily mix it up. You know, if like there's 1 and 2, is this one needs storm sewer, which is like a different contractor, and this one needs paving. So just depending on how much money we have and where the projects are, they may go from 1 year to the next, but they're all in the mix.
And the street condition report is online for people to see.
It is on our website, yes.
Thank you, Bruce.
Sorry, Bruce, Your Worship, if I may. I can't find it, but when it comes to asset management for streets and whatnot, there's kind of a rough rule of thumb, the 138, and as Bruce alluded to, 8 would be the $8. So there's the ratio of $8, $3, and $1. And those roads that are number 5 in poor condition, usually you think about $8 to do that, but we're just talking about scale here. And as you go down, it gets cheaper. So really what you want to do is be proactive and spend money on the $1 and $3 repairs so they don't get to the $8 repair. And at the end of the day, that's also part of the life cycle planning that you were talking about, and that's what Bruce does. And again, I can't emphasize enough that this is an objective analysis of the roads. It's not a political determination.
Right, and that's what I wanted to highlight, that it's completely objective and evidence-based.
Correct.
Thank you, because Majestic Drive is there and I don't want to hear from anybody.
Ooh, that's a mistake.
That's a mistake, but
Okay, that's fine.
a portion of Majestic Drive. Yes, I forgot to get that through there. That's not that I really want to go through. But Majestic Drive from Baycrest to the cul-de-sac is being done.
Well, that's right up there in my area.
Well, it is, but it's not all of Majestic Drive.
No.
So it's from Baycrest to the cul-de-sac, and then sometimes that comes off of that, so we got a little there.
To say how important this street assessment is, my first year on council, I was given a videotape. In fact, I think I might still have it, Bruce, of all of the capital projects Bruce wanted to do on video. I'm not an engineer, nor would I ever put myself in that criteria. But I watched the video and I kept thinking, yeah, okay, we got problems. And this came out of the solutions of the council of the day by having this done. And then it also takes it away from the councillors as to which street is requested. And we do it based on need. And I can tell you, we've had a pile of $8 streets. And now we're getting through it much quicker than what we ever did. So hats off to Bruce and his team and the contractors that have come in and done the work in our community. They've been reliable and we haven't had a whole lot of issues with them doing the work.
And just to expand on that, because I guess I've been here for a while, but with the street condition report, I know I was here before the street condition report, and they would call, and it was always greasy wheel.
Yeah.
Where it go. But now it's what's the road condition, because some of these streets are small. Like there's other streets that could be, there's lots of people on there, but it has nothing to do with population, it's what's the street condition, and we've been doing that for years, and it's worked out great in there.
Thank you, Bruce.
Designated highway, again, this is another program that we have. We ask for funding from the province. If they give us funding, so we don't know, it'll probably be at the end of March, which would be their fiscal year. They'll let us know if they'll provide us money. So what we're looking to do next year on designated highway is to do curb and gutter on the east side from Milligan up. So we want to make sure it's there all the way to Ferry Road, which are these little gaps in there. That allows us to put the curb on the east side and possibly widen for bike lane, get as much as we can, because some of them are downhill, we may not get too much land, but if we can get land, but we want to get the curb in, which is the hard infrastructure. That allows the opportunity to come in and pave. So that's what we're asking for on that. Now with that is, because it's a designated highway, the province funds all the capital work, not the operational work, but the capital improvements, because it is still their highway with 177. But with that, if we put in our 19% and help along, it encourages them to give us, so we have to put in 100,000 if they give us the money to do that. Now, if they don't give us enough for the entire project, then we have this 100,000 which can go back into capital or reserves or use elsewhere. But we have to budget for it because we won't know probably until March whether we get it.
So if the province says no, we're not funding these projects, and then they don't have them.
They don't have
That's another example of how we're dependent on the province for getting some of this work done.
And again, so we're looking to get the curb in, which is the hard infrastructure, so that once we get that done, then that section can be resurfaced.
Question, Your Worship. Just for clarification, the designated highway that we're talking about is primarily Route 177.
It's all 177.
Which is also known by our residents as River Valley Drive to a certain point, which then by Unity Park
Narrows Road, yes.
is the Parks Road.
Yeah, it's all 177, but yeah, they have the two distinctions.
That can be confusing for the residents.
Okay.
Just want to clarify.
But yeah, so that's a good point.
Because we've had a lot of citizens that have voiced at times that for our main drag of the community, it's in pretty poor shape. It should have smooth asphalt. And what they don't understand is that it's not our street. And we can only go so far on it.
John?
Your Worship, we have approached the province If you refer back to my remarks around the ratio of 8:3:1, we did put the case to them that it'd be more effective to spend their capital dollars that way rather than waiting for a road to completely degrade, but that's not their policy at this time. That doesn't mean we're going to stop advocating to encourage council that perhaps this is something that could be raised about how effective it is the use of tax dollars on these items. Because as it is, we do, there was 2 days, I think it was August 1st or September, when the crews were here, and they did a lot of patching along the way. And that's the $3 repair that is going on. It prolongs the life of the asset. It makes it a lot more usable as well. But we like to encourage the province that, that maybe they should reinvest some of their dollars that way. I understand maybe they have those Condition 5 roads and the $8 expenses, but it may be prudent to come up with an asset management plan that addresses these more proactively and as a result more cost effectively, reducing the strain on taxpayer dollars.
Thank you, John.
Other capital projects that we've got proposed or I guess approved for 2022, yes, is RRFB flashing lights at River Valley Drive in Inglewood and Ferry Road and Airbus Road. We're waiting for the traffic studies to be done to get that. So the RRFB stands for Rectangular Rapid Flashing Beacon. So an example would be at Panamac Road and River Valley Drive, where there's the push buttons and the lights flash. So that's RRFBs. So we're looking to put in a set up at River Valley and Inglewood, so you can complete the trail, cross River Valley, back to the sidewalk, or sidewalk to the trail, but cross through there, and then up at the Ferry Road, so you can cross there. Some conflict we're running into that we're discussing with the rail. We're concerned with the two flashing lights, railway and pedestrian beacon at the same location. So there may be some offsetting happening, but we're working on that. So again, we're hoping to get that done, and then we'll have the funds to purchase the lights and put them in action. But it may not be directly across from the store because of the potential conflict with the flashing light for the pedestrians, flashing for the railway, and cars not knowing what's. So we're working with our traffic engineer. I had a meeting last week there with Andy Southern, or New Brunswick Maine Railway. So we're looking at that, and then some other issues with DTI. We're communicating with that. So.
Good, yeah, these are important projects, particularly with COVID, people using the trail more and using the trail one way. It's a safe way for them to get from one side to the other. And with the Ferry Road and Airbus Road, we have the schools, the kids going over to Brunch Point. This is a safe way for them to get there. So
yeah, with that we just need to discuss that it's not a simple intersection.
Yes, no, there's a lot of layers.
Yeah, it is. And it's been mentioned a couple times, the trickling filter plant up off of McLean Road. The building or the trickling filter plant itself, was built back in '72, so next year it's 50 years old. So its life cycle is there. So it needs to be upgraded again with new technologies, new materials, get that to last another 50 years.
The trickling plant. So this will increase the capacity of the storage ability in that area?
It will be investigated as well, because that's sort of the purpose is we're going to upgrade it. We don't want to status quo, we want to improve it.
Yeah, so we have more development up there, can you?
Right, that's what we want to do.
John?
Your worship, just, if Bruce could back up one slide. Catch basin 0499, really sexy name.
I got distracted.
Oh, could you forget
I got distracted.
That's that catch basin at the bottom of Colonel Nays on River Valley Drive. That requires more than just a quick patch. It's a big repair.
Right, and again, last week it was called on, but, and again, we've got it paved and patched now, but the entire structure down the base needs to be redone. So that's a major job in the middle of an intersection, traffic control, and all that. And I guess another line that I forgot the first time was the geotechnical, and again, with our growth and envision going ahead, is we're looking for a new horse garage, or we're looking for a site. And we have a site that now sort of want to investigate. We did some studies this year, waiting for the results of the water. And then now we'll want to investigate further about what soils are out there, what type of foundation, what type of building that needs to be built on that land. So that when time comes to do it, we've got all that pre-prep.
Your Worship, if I may just add, the Works Garage is, talk about life cycle planning. I think it has an afterlife now.
Yes.
And so we'd like to be able to get that going sooner than later. So we may be coming to council sooner than later for this. The current garage, like I said, is in its afterlife, and it's really undersized. And it really doesn't serve our work crews very well.
All righty, thank you, and I'll hand it over to.
Good evening again. So earlier I was presenting to you as the fire chief for this. For this section, I'll be presenting as your deputy CAO to cover off some other capital projects that we're looking at for 2022. So the first item we have here is our flood stop wall around River Center. This is basically a flood mitigation project that will protect the River Center in the event of the record floods that we have experienced and will pretty much guaranteed experience again at some point. We want to hope it'll be many years down the road and that this expenditure will simply be an insurance policy and maybe never needed, but it will be there should it be needed. Generators, as we mentioned earlier, this building, as of this year, will be the only building that has a backup generator, and so we also are looking to get a second generator for the River Center so that it can act as a warming and a cooling center. I think this is probably a good example to kind of point out that when we talk about all of our capital projects and our budget items, not everything is necessarily set in stone. This is what we're looking at, this is what we're budgeting for. Some things may change. Initial looks at these things said that the River Center might be the best option, but once we actually get into the project, really dig into it, research it, and plan for it, we may determine that it could be somewhere else, and that can apply to a lot of different things. Sometimes you plan for a certain thing, and when you go and get your engineering done, they say that's not going to work, it physically can't happen, here's another alternative. So we're always ready to make adjustments as we need to. Solar panels, the town began this environmental project in this current year, 2021, with the initial solar panel installation at the sewage lagoon. This will be continued next year with phase 2 of that. Earlier the CAO discussed water sustainability and ensuring for development that we're able to, as a community, have the water supply needed to support that development. So this will be a continuation of that project. As it's noted, it'll be an annual thing that we'll be doing. Improving public infrastructure in our higher density zones. Next would be our centrum siding. So there's going to be a few things to do with this building. As some people know, this building has been here since, I believe, 1979 is when it was constructed. A good portion of it, including the siding that is on the building, is original. It is very much faded. There are lots of areas where it's damaged and much need of an update. So this particular project will look at the front of the building and the north side of the building to do the re-siding. It's also going to include a refresh of the front to essentially better identify where the actual town offices are. So as we know, this building went under some renovations, I would say almost 20 years ago, that moved the town office's location. So the entrance actually became like the smallest door in front of the building. So when people arrive, it's very hard for them to tell which door they're really supposed to enter. So we're going to address a lot of those issues with that. Outdoor recreation study, this was highlighted a little bit back earlier this evening, and this is in reference to doing a feasibility study on beach access. Next, we're looking at replacing some of the doors at the River Center. We did some of those in 2021. This is going to look at the ones that are on the back side of the building, the side facing the river. When that building was constructed, it was all residential type doors that were put in. They've been repaired probably 10, 15, 20 times. It's been quite a number of times they've been repaired. They've been repaired as much as they possibly can be. For what they were, they actually gave the building a pretty good life and gotten the value out of them. So we're replacing those with actual commercial doors that should last a great deal longer. Back to the Centrum, as was also highlighted earlier, there'll be some additional staff and some staffing changes through the organization. So we need to account for a place to actually have them operate and do the jobs that we're going to be asking them to do. So we're going to be doing some boardroom and office renovations to make that type of space. Flooring and paint for the Centrum is the same idea. The main hallway, some of the town offices, then the flooring has not been done since it was constructed, which I believe is in close to 20 years now, especially for the flooring. And some of that's starting to peel out a little bit, and it's basically due for replacement. You could probably consider this similar to the street thing. We can do it now and have it cost this much, or we can wait and have it cost a lot more. Next up would be the fire department review. And CIO talked about this earlier as well, is to have a third party come in, look at the fire department, look at the community, and then make recommendations to council to consider. So what will come before council, the goal of this will be a variety of level of services that council will be able to make that decision on and decide, okay, yes, this is the level of service that we want to provide our citizens, and therefore, as CEO mentioned, that's council's way of controlling budgets and how things are spent, as well as in balancing, of course, one of the most important things is providing good service to our community in all departments. And I believe, the last item for our other capital projects is decision optimization technology, which is a rather complex title, but the short version of it is it's a capital asset long-term financial planning software. So it's a software where we'll be able to enter in data for all of the high-value assets, and it'll allow primarily the Works Commissioner to plan out and do that long-term planning for what's going to cost to maintain it. It's basically the life cycle stuff that we were talking about earlier. This is the software that's going to help manage that, take that through. And next up will be Surge. You're going to be our CFO. Thank you.
Thank you, Troy.
So at least we'll keep you awake by coming back and forth here. Thank you again, Worship Council. We're going to talk about the surge aspect of the business now, and just for people's knowledge that this has to be a self-balancing revenue and expense. So whatever expenses are, the revenue has to match it. It does not come from the general operating side of the business. So the users of that service pay for that service. And so we're going to look first at the revenue and kind of, we shouldn't do it the other way around, so maybe I'll do that and back up a slide after, but...
It's a great, just for people that are watching, it's legislated that has to be.
Yes, it is.
We're not.
The original legislation mandates that the utility, whether it's water, wastewater, electricity, they be self-funded from within their operation. Thank you.
Just a question at the start, Your Worship, which may be the mandate. The question at the CAO most, what percentage of the residents are on sewer in our town?
Just over half, if I recall correctly. 1,766 homes, I believe, and we have under 2,400 homes.
Half are on sewer, and the other half, of course, would be on septic systems of their own.
That's right. Yeah, so over 1,700 on sewer, and then the remaining 700 to 800 would be on septic systems. And septic systems are a significant investment.
Thank you.
The last time there was a government funding from the feds, we were able to expand the sewerage, and we made sure that the lagoon and our sewage system that we had would be able to handle the expansion with Colonel Mice as well. But the big problem we've got is going to Westfield. No one wants a lagoon in their backyard. And there's a lot of one home on an acre. in that area. And it's getting all of the connections to make it viable. And we've talked long and hard about different places to put it, but I can tell you, somebody always had a reason why we couldn't put it where we thought we might be able to put it. So, and then you've got to think about it, it's got to run downhill. And
Massively expensive insurance.
yeah, huge. So,
And that infrastructure cost has to be paid for by the users, correct?
Yes,
that's right.
Not the general.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor, and Councilor, that's an excellent segue what we're talking about, that's some very good background for it. Because again, water, wastewater infrastructure is capital intensive, hugely capital intensive. If you look at the borrowing restrictions in New Brunswick, I spoke about earlier, 6% of your assessment base, that's for your operating side. If you go over to your utility side, it realizes that it's capital nature, that 50% of your budget value can be for debt. So it's a lot larger than the other side because it's very capital intensive. And so, based on the segue, I'll skip ahead pass this slide to this slide. So this is the expenses first. And this is what drives your revenue that your users have to pay. And so in here, we have collection, that's about 17%. We have lift station, and again, it's for those situations where it's not gravity driven, you have to pump uphill or pump the direction your facility is. Cost for the lagoon at about 10%. There's an old little line in here, old plant at 1%, but if you need any questions on that, we look to the Board Commissioner to answer that. And we have administration, for administration salaries and wages is at 10% and administration other at 7%. And then our fiscal, again, and this is what's driving your budget increase, is at 37%. Fiscal is what pays for your capital. And there is a debenture issue coming online this year that's going to drive up the principal by $37,000. So the operating budget for the utilities increasing about $48,000. $37,000 of that is a debenture coming online for an annual payment, $37,000 in the principal side. So that is the key driver of what you're seeing. So the total here for these expenses is about $590,000. We'll back up to the revenue slide now, and we can see that the residential is the largest component of this. I think as the question came, there's 1,760 accounts which are comprise of all of these, and they are paying in 2021 a rate, we pay the same rate, $285. So the utility has these self-balancing for 2022 to balance that budget would require a rate of $307. And so for 285 to 307. And then we'd be sitting here next fall looking at how do we get through 2023. And as you know, we've talked about with local government reform, 2022, I'll be honest, this is a transition time for this community based on your strategic planning things, but depending on that report coming out, it's even a more significant transition of what the future looks like and how you do these things. And so, rather than just come back here and look at that next year, we've talked about going from just a little more up to $315. But if we take $315 versus $307, that's $8 by your residents. That puts $14,000 in your reserve. But if we go to $325, at least you're now getting a little bit of money in there. So what we're showing here is a revenue that will take you to rate $325 per unit. And that's a $27 a month, sorry, $27 for the year, $33.33 a month increase for that facility, utility. And I can tell you from my experience that you can look at all your other things, your utility, your sewage, and your water, and we don't have a water utility at this point in time, I realize that, but those two are a fundamental for any community that wants to grow. And in my career at the city of St. John, when they had to redo the wastewater treatment plant, was just upgrading the existing plant and the infrastructure was $100 million. And in lift stations, because it's all underground and doing this, and unfortunately at that point in time they had a treatment plant that had been well beyond capacity, and there was raw sewage going into the environment, and it was not a nice story. So as challenging as it may be for people, this, if you're going to grow your community, this is a fundamental piece of it, your utility infrastructure. And so, and I think, as Seo mentioned and Mr. Councilor Ball mentioned, a lot of people are on a septic system. So if you take one of those systems and have to replace it at your house or build a new house with it in it, take that cost and amortize it over 15 years, this annual cost is not a lot of money. It's not cheap, but it's not, it's the reality of life that we're in. So that is that budget in a nutshell. Again, I can ask you questions if you'd like, sure.
Well, the thing is the previous councils always looked at the fact that nobody doesn't have water. We received assessments back looking at putting water in, and the cost was astronomical. And that is not something we could have even amortized over generations, because it was just unbelievable what the cost was going to be. So we took it that if we look after sewerage, and the more our systems are looked after, that protects our water.
Yes. It's an environmental protection for sure. Yes.
Yeah. And the other thing is we've put a lot of solar panels down on the lagoon already, and we're going to be adding more. Are we seeing savings by having them already?
The first panel there, yes. When we put the additional ones in, we'll receive more, yes.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay, that's good.
So if adjustments have been made for inflation since 2007,
No, Your Worship, it's, the rate's been steady at 270 since then. And if you account for inflation, that, annual increases were put in, the rate now would be almost $344. And so I know it doesn't help right now with money coming out of people's pocket, but there's still an inflationary discount that's baked into this price, if I can put it that way.
right, because.
So it doesn't feel like a discount, but I can assure people that if you go to the inflation calculator of the Bank of Canada, it's discounted.
Right, and so if we go with this recommendation, and you said about $3.33 a month per account.
Your Worship, yes, that's correct.
And so we're going to, is there a capacity for people to pay monthly, should they so choose?
Yes.
Okay, so we can make that arrangement, so it's basically a Tim Hortons coffee a month kind of thing.
Yeah, and I'd just like to say, Your Worship, we're looking at some operational changes to make it easier for people to make payments.
Well, I think it's important for us to invest in our infrastructure. This is, if our toilets don't flush, that's big deal.
Yeah.
So, I know nobody wants to put rates up, but I think we have to be responsible.
And not trying to diminish any other services. All the services that are here are fire is important. And these are day-to-day things, water and wastewater, that without that, and I've lived in a home that we were on a septic in a well, and your power was out, too bad for you, and I'm sure all of you experienced that. When you're on the system, there's a benefit to it. And also, it's environmentally a better system than having these individuals all over the place when you start to try to expand your income.
Your Worship and Council, if in the morning people can't evacuate the bladder or bowels and they can't brush their teeth, even though we don't have water, we fundamentally failed in the core delivery of the one service that municipalities are responsible for.
You're right about that.
So that's the sewerage piece. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about the operating budget at a higher level. Time to put on the other glasses again so I can read the screen here. So what this chart is, it's a tax rate impact. And so the top line here is a tax base. A tax base is a little different than the assessment base, and the assessment base has a residential and a non-residential component, and then there's some calculations in there that bring it to the tax base. And so the tax base last year, $388,995, up to $435 this year, an increase of 11.96%. Our expenditures, as you can see, have gone up by 4.58. The non-tax revenue has gone down by 3%, $12,000. It's a little change. Second previous year surplus has gone down this year, and it's changed that total by about $12,000. That gives us net expenditures that are up by about 5.09%. As we've alluded to before, the grant funding is down by to $265. That's $335,000. So our 56%, and so our tax rate, we're maintaining the same to raise a warrant that's up by basically 11.96%. And you can see that our increased capacity, as I mentioned earlier, from the growth in the base, $637,000. Decrease in the grant funding, so we're down, we lose $335,000. We have net new revenue of about $300,000. And we're doing things with, as we've talked about, expenses beyond our control. Municipality, we're 43% of $130,000, and so we're having increased spending about $300,000, take off the 130, about 170 net. Now there's a whole bunch of other lines, other than show that are up and down over the budget. But again, if you start looking at smaller items, they can total up. But I think Councilor Baldwin for 2.9, don't give me percentages on a $300 item because they're meaningless, And so this is how we're looking at the big stuff here, but we're also internally, we look at every account, see what we're doing, where we're going, and understanding that. So this is what we're doing, holding the tax rate at $1.37 and increasing our funding by $300,000. And that will do some of your tactical plan pieces as well as the expenses beyond our control.
I'd like to comment. I've been on this council for 20 years, and this is the first time we've ever had the grant funding reduced. And it just upsets me to no end that we would have that happen to us in a community where, yes, when I joined council, we have a lot of debt. We paid it down, and we didn't go with our hands out to the province asking them to help us out. We did it. And the citizens of this community backed us up. And here we were at a point for change. We were left by the previous councils in a good financial state, and then the grant funding got cut. It's like having your feet whipped out from underneath of you. And what our citizens don't know is that we've sat here for 2 nights, long hours discussing what we were going to do. And we knew and we heard about other communities reducing your tax rate to offset the increase in the assessments. I would have loved to have been able to do that. It's $44,000. We could have dropped it maybe by 2 pennies, $88,000. But we're short by $335,000 from the previous year. And I know you, your worship, and the rest of you went to meet with them in the government. And no, I didn't go because I was probably going to start writing some people high fiber diet regimens, because after 20 years of never having the grant funding reduced, I think it's disgusting. I really do. And a community that is on, I'm going to say we're on the verge of growing and offering and maintaining our budgets. And it's just very, very heartbreaking.
It is, and where the fact that staff is able to present a budget to us where we're actually able to maintain the tax rate in our situation by tightening our belts.
Yeah.
And making some really hard choices it's a credit to the incredible staff that we have.
It is, and this town has always had the whole years very lean. We don't buy anything unless we need it. It's always been questioned by the previous town manager. And this CAO has continued on that way. But it's very, very hard knowing that we could have had 301,000 or 335,000 more to do things in this community, whether it's repairing a street, to all the different committees we've got, and the growth we could want. So
it's tough to be, like I said, hard choices, work hard, make and be as creative as possible and try to get our tax plan complete.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
So I think building on those comments, that again, you mentioned that we're going into 2022 as a transition year. And one of the things that municipalities continue to convey to the provincial government is we need predictable, sustainable funding. And so if we look at where we're at, and this again to CAO's reference to multi-year budgeting, we'll have to have a series of assumptions that speak to what that means. And I know sometimes people do the assumptions and they're kind of over here and then you talk about what the numbers are. I will assure you that first thing I'll talk about in a multi-year budget is here's some 3 critical assumptions or 5 critical assumptions. And one of them is sustainable funding. And we'll build on assumptions that again, on a small c conservative, not politically, but accountants are understate the revenue, overstate the expenses, and see how that looks. And if that works, then it goes the other way, you have lower expenses or higher revenue, then you're doing very well. So those will be assumptions, and they'll be critical building a multi-year budget. But again, as we go into this transition year, coming out of 2022, or going into even early 2022, we'll know about the local government reform and what that will mean to us, and we'll build those things into our financial model going forward. That will then, rather than, as CEO alluded to, we come in here, do a 1-year budget, and then we come back and do a 1-year budget, and that's not long-range planning, not creating financial sustainability. Now, the challenge is going to be that, again, not having the ability to set your tax rate 2 years in advance, because again, the assessment will come next year, the grant funding will come next year, things will happen. But we'll have an idea, and you'll know where we're going, you'll know where you're going, and then we can hopefully have some stability. And again, what we're trying to do as administration is, if the council, you're the what you want, our job is the how to do that and what it costs you. And that's what we're trying to get to with what we're doing in a multi-year plan. So,
Your Worship, I just want to build on what our CFO said. In the letter that council sent to the Vibrant New Brunswick Committee at the end of June, one of our recommendations or suggestions was that there be predictable and transparent funding, and that would include an identifiable funding pool. And I guess my hope is when they release the white paper, Your Worship, that would be included. Because it's nice to be able to point at, this is where our funding is going to come from. It's not an arbitrary pool of money. It's something that any municipality in the province can look at. Provincial government can say, oh, that's a pool of money that we don't touch. It either goes up, it goes down, but it's not a political decision. And then once we know what the numbers are, we can anticipate, okay, here's what our share is. That's something I very strongly think that we need to work towards, Your Worship. And it'll make our job to ensure the financial sustainability and, of course, responsibility and effectiveness a lot easier. Right now, we got that notice, I think it was 3 weeks ago, Your Worship, about that cut. And that really threw us off track a little bit. But hopefully 23 will be a different experience.
Yes, I hope so. There's a real inadequacy in legislation as it stands right now.
anything more before we leave this slide? Okay. This is a little more detail on the budget summary. And so, again, I spoke earlier that we get into the revenue side of things. So the non-tax revenue, we have sale of services. So we have recreation, which we're holding flat, and in this environment we're in, COVID, et cetera, when will things generate more revenue? We don't know, so we're just being conservative there. River Center rentals, we're looking at a little increase because the CAO mentioned earlier, we're going to limit the use of this facility, and then the fire service revenue. Other revenue, you can see building permits, ambulance, interest income, and miscellaneous. So just pretty well flat there. And then the change in the surplus the second previous year, again, sorry, I said 12,000, down 21,000. Again, that's just a result of the year-end position changing from one year to the next. And then we have community funding grant, and then the warrant, and then our total operating budget. So that's the revenue side. Any questions there, or?
Yes, the surplus.
Yeah.
For 2021, are you looking at a positive variance of 136,000 at the end of our fiscal year?
No, that's the carry forward from previous 2 years ago.
Oh, okay.
And then 2022 is the carry forward from 2020. So as we do this year's budget, that'll go into 2023.
Great. How are we looking at?
We're looking, I can't give you a definite number, we're positive. And again, as we look at some of the challenges we're facing, if there's an opportunity to fund some things out of that surplus, or start doing,
Yeah.
we're gonna make a projection for the end of the year, I'm working on it right now. And so if we have some room, we talked about the fire service review, we pulled that out of the operating budget, but maybe there's an opportunity to start that a little early because we have some money available, set that money aside, now that gets done.
Yeah.
Without impacting the 2022 budget. So we'll look at things like that as we see where we are. And then also look at putting some money from the surplus into your operating reserve. So if something pops up in 2022 or 2023, you've got that rainy day fund there that all of a sudden is not hitting your bottom line, and all of a sudden, now what do we do? So it's not huge, but it's growing, and you saw one of the lines in there on the utility side, so the operating side was to grow that by a determined initial $10,000 a year, plus some extra money if we've had some savings. Okay?
Thank you, Rick.
Questions? All right. Second page of this goes on to the expenditure side, and a lot of details there. So the non-tax revenues summary there. Then our expenditures broken down. This is a numeric format. It was in the chart earlier. And so we can see that our total expenditures again up 4.58% or 289,000, and across the realm there, and then coming down to your tax rate at the bottom. So this is just a little more detail from the summary slides beforehand, and rather than, I will not torture you by walking through those because they do not know the components of each of them anyhow. But if you have a question, we can certainly look to answer that. But again, when you look down the percentages. There's nothing out of line there other than the environmental development. You see it at 28.94, and that's a development incentive for $50,000 that contractually obligated by the policy of council from 2019.
Question for Bishop.
Yes.
In environmental development, does that include all expenditures that the town is currently doing for what we call economic development?
I'll refer to it.
Yes, environmental development in the past has been used as kind of a hodgepodge collection of expenses. And the CFO and I have already discussed that we need to bring some hygienic scrubbing to the budget to ensure that we get the right alignment here. One of the things that we need to do with the budget is ensure it aligns with the strategic plan. Right now, by putting different components into the environmental development where they don't belong, we're not getting that. So yes, we'll be making those changes, Councillor.
Thank you.
The fiscal costs, they went up from 1,273,000 to 1,281,000. Projecting out with what you may know now, are we looking at those constantly to be increasing, or are we going to finally end up paying some of our bills or our loans down?
Well, the biggest piece of that money in there, it's 1.3.
1.3.
Yeah, 847,000 of that money is for your capital. It's not for paying debt. It's over here to fund your capital program.
Oh, okay, all right.
All right, so the debt is a smaller component of that.
Okay.
And again, as we talk about the debt service ratio, that's not your fiscal services as a component of your budget. That's your principal and interest, what they are. So 5% of this budget goes roughly to that. And as we alluded to earlier, as we look at where we're going, and we've talked about a works garage, but again, this is the key point about a transitional year, that as we look at the outcome of local government reform, and we talked about a snow and ice control contract that's outsourced. So when we see what we're going to look like in a few years, and we do a service review, that'll determine what we're doing and who's doing it. And that has ramifications on many fronts, as the CEO alluded to. And all of a sudden, if you're doing it yourself, now you're in the market for a bunch of big equipment that's very pricey, you know. And so, but again, those are things that as we see what the future looks like, we'll plan for those. But rest assured, be confident that we're not going to come in here and you're not going to see your debt go from 5% to 15.
No,
Not-
because when I joined council, I learned very quickly about servicing costs.
Yeah.
And what we were paying for servicing costs was
Debt
unbelievable.
servicing costs.
Yeah. And so by paying the debt down,
Yeah.
we got rid of a lot of that, and we were able to put that in roads.
But again, it's that whole type of asset you're looking at and who's paying for it and when. But again, and you could look at, we talk about economics. So I'll go back to right around 2008 when the markets collapsed. We're seeing long-term bond rates from then till now, the lowest they've ever been in North America, and the lowest in Europe since the 1600s. That's going to start to increase. And so what you need to be careful of, because there's two pieces that impact your debt service. One is how much you borrow, but the other is the rate you borrow at. And right now, I would say somewhere, and we do a debenture over 15 years, say it has a different rate every year because of the way they do it. But if we average, say, 3.1% or 3.25%, that's a lot lower than a lot of commercial entities can borrow from in the private sector. So, but again, as that starts to draw up, look at your mortgage sometime when you get a mortgage. The term is important, but also that component of what the rate is, that can have a huge impact on what your payments are. So we'll be totally conscious of that as we speak to council about what makes sense to fund through debt, but also this fiscal here, we're putting this almost $900,000 a year into that reserve to fund capital. And right now it's all going to the current year, but as we grow that a little bit every year to get a bigger reserve, then not all that has to go over here for capital. And this is a long-term fiscal plan, a long-term debt plan. I know you had some work done in the fall about it, and so we're looking at a 5-year capital plan. We looked out as far as 10 years. 10 years, it gives you an idea what's coming down the road. 5 years is as far as you want to go in terms of solid planning and making decisions today. But again, back to be very confident with sustainability and predictability of your funding. Because if you all of a sudden you committed to something, and then somebody comes and picks your pocket for a 30-year revenue, you know, and I'm not saying they're going to, but that's the risk you have by not having your own total control. So, but you do have control of what you're going to spend based on assumptions, based on prudence. That's the financial modeling that we'll bring forward and do. And I know that's probably a little more than you asked for in that question, but
That's okay,
it's
I
totally
enjoy it.
related. And I'm terrible at wanting to teach and help people understand because it drags on the conversation. But anyhow, so that's that. Any other questions at this point?
That's good, Greg, thank you.
And I don't know if there's any others or not. Oh, the tax rate impact, okay? So again, we're seeing growth in the assessments that people have. And so we put in a couple of examples here for people to understand. So the first one, if your house was assessed for $100,000 in 2021, you paid $1,370 in property tax. So in 2022, if your assessment stayed the same, you pay the same tax. If your assessment up by $25,000, you're going to pay $1,712.50, an increase of $342, $28.54 a month. That's going up $25,000. Put up $50,000, which we've heard some have, then you're going to go up by $685 on the current tax rate, or $57 a month. And so that's just a couple of examples. We look at 175 and 225, and the interesting thing you'll see here is that the annual increase is the same, because for every $25,000, it's the same tax rate. So if we went from 175 to 200, or 100 to 125, you're seeing the same tax rate increase. And I can would show you by every $10,000, which is $137, basically what you'd see. So for every $10,000 your assessment goes up, your tax bill will increase $137.
I have a quick question, Greg, about the spike protection. So if your house assessment increased, what is it over, what, a certain percentage, the province puts spike protection on, or up to 10%?
Yeah, it's up to. It goes over 10%.
So these numbers will not include that spike protection.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So if there's no more questions, I will turn it back to the CAO. Take my notes. Got my mask. Escape. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg. Your worship, I just conclude first by thanking the leadership team, Gary, Greg, Bruce, Troy, David, who's not here, Nicole, for all the hard work, the many hours. We've been pretty much budget focused for 3 or 4 weeks, I think it is. That doesn't include the work that they did starting in August to get the numbers together. And so just, team, I really want to thank you for the hard work that you guys done. And we hope that it meets your satisfaction. So before we go to, the last slide about recommendations, is there any further questions that council may have to better illustrate the budget or, or comments to help us better align it with council's strategic plan?
Deputy Mayor.
I just wanted to say a couple things. The first one, how much I think all of us here and probably everybody watching appreciated the presentation. I was just saying it basically laid it out to us from beginning to end, so I have a full understanding of the rationale and things that were done. So I think that everybody who put that together was extremely helpful. And I echo what Councillor Day said about the kit that we received when we had the grant decrease. But if we look on the other end of it, I found we did have growth. So the positive is grant rate did grow. We didn't get the full benefit of being able to play with that extra money from the growth. We only got a bit of it. But what I think you guys did with this budget when I was looking is you basically did a lot with a little. You hit improving all of our services and also being able to hit every single one of the strategic pillars. By the choices that were made to add are choices that don't just hit one pillar, they impact all of them. For example, the communications officer, you can see a piece in everybody's strategic pillar, and that's going to help with services and going to help with what we heard from the town. So I think I'm happy that we can hold the tax rate. I'm disappointed we don't have the revenue to be able to do more or to be able to do the decreases that other towns have done, but I want to assure, I guess the question that the CAO had for all of us is, can you sleep at night when these are done? We can, because I think we've done a lot with a little. Improved how the money's being spent. The little bit of revenue we did end up getting has been allocated really, really well. And also the side of it that we need to continue to think about is the local governance reform that is going to be coming out in a couple weeks with the white paper, and we don't know what's there. But I think all of these additions and services and ads that have been made will be useful no matter what we get. It's going to be able to help us transition in. So that's kind of my comments on it. The presentation was great. Like I find I do have a solid understanding, and so I think everybody else here probably has the same review. So thank you all very much for the hard work, and I am very comfortable with what you presented, even though it's not what we wanted to be able to do. I think we did a lot with a little, so I appreciate it.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions for John? And I just want to echo some of what everybody has said and felt, that we've spent a lot of long hours as a council and sleepless nights and looking at the information and learning the information and weighing hard decisions, and that the leadership team and staff have probably spent far more hours even than we have, and we feel like we've spent a good amount of time. And I just want to thank you for, like I said, we thought we were going to go into this with a big, a big growth pile of potential, and it didn't end up being that way, and we only found out a short time ago. So that the pivots and the belt tightening in a creative way is really impressive, and so thank you for that.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I just realized, Council, that I forgot one slide in the presentation. The org chart isn't in there, and just for our Council's information and our residents, we have 13 full-time employees. We have 3 seasonal employees in the Works Department, and we have 2 casual employees who are the facilities supervisors, so they're considered part-time. So overall, our total staffing is 16, if I'm doing my math right, not 16, be 18 people. So we're a very lean organization. With the addition of the recreation liaison officer and communications officer, that would take us up to 20, which is very, very small for a municipality ourselves.
That's true. Okay, well, so this is a transition budget. It's, as our CFO has said more than one time, it's the beginning of a new direction for our town. And we have a lot of work to do to overcome these challenges, but I think we can do it.
Your Worship, just anticipation, we've done all this. As the CFO has alluded to, and I have, we still don't know what the RCMP numbers are. So we just recommend that council refer this to your next regular meeting of council to adopt, and with the understanding that we're still anticipating changes to the budget once we understand what the RCMP cost, the impact of that's going to be. We've anticipated anywhere from 3.95% up to about 15%. I think our recommendation is going to be, Your Worship and Council, that we go into the operational reserve. One of the intents of that is to try and smooth over periods like this where there's been a significant decrease in the revenue that we're receiving, and just help smooth that out. With only currently 13 full-time employees, it's difficult to understand where or identify where some of the savings may be. There's not a lot of fat in this organization. I'm new here, I can't find it. Our CFO is fairly new, and he came to my office one day and said, "Where are we going to find savings?" You know? So there's definitely challenges for us, but our recommendation would be using the operational reserve just to help smooth over this difficult period. And then hopefully part of the local government reform white paper will be clearly identifying what the new funding formula may be, if there is one. Hopefully they address that, Your Worship.
If I might just, when we come forward at the council meeting with the appropriate recommendations, they're quite detailed, required by the province, what the tax rate is, and so it's going to be a lot more detailed than that. But that's just so when you see it, you see these recommendations here. This is what we're building on. But people who are returning councilors will know that it's a big page, and all kinds of requirements for the province how you do that. So the actual rate and the expenditure levels and the revenue, this very detailed. The resolution will have to pass to approve that.
All right, so I'll just read the motion that the council of the town of Bay-Westfield refer the proposed operational budget for 2022 as presented, pending confirmation of the cost of the RCMP for approval at council's next regular meeting, and that the council of the town of Bay-Westfield refer the proposed capital budget for 2022 for approval at council's next regular meeting, and that the council of the town of Bay-Westfield refer the proposed sewerage budget for 2022 as presented for approval at council's next regular meeting. May I have a motion, please?
Moved.
Thank you, Councillor Bellmans. May I have a second? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion is carried. Thank you, everybody. I have if there's no other comments, I'll have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Wait a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion is carried. Meeting is adjourned at 8:27 p.m. Thank you, everybody.